Welcome to Sleek Notes E-Commerce Boost Podcast, your chance to learn from the e-commerce experts so you can boost your business.
Hey everyone, so this week I'm super excited to share my talk with Bill Macaitis, who's a former CMO at Zendesk and COO and CMO at Slack, where he's achieved absolutely incredible results. In this interview, we speak about how e-commerce companies can stand out from the crowd. He shares how he would go about establishing a marketing department from scratch, and he lets you in on his tactics when setting a winning marketing team. So let's just roll the interview. Okay, Bill, welcome so much on the show. So happy to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's great to talk.
Cool. If you could just start out by presenting yourself, that would be amazing.
Yeah, sure. So, I've always had a passion for starting up businesses, growing them. Did a startup right out of college, co-founded a site, didn't even know about VCs. I wish I did because it was really painful. We had to use all of our own money, but, it taught us operational discipline and growing and scaling. And, we got profitable. We sold that business. Worked in the B2C side of the house for about 10 years, sold a couple companies there, and then went to the B2B side of the house. And most recently had worked with Salesforce. Zendesk as their CMO, took them through an IPO, and then Slack as their CRO. And now I've actually shifted into just doing, board advisor roles or independent board member roles to help other startups grow and scale their company.
Cool, really cool. Great. So obviously you have a lot of expertise in making a company stand out from the competitors. I know you did a TV advertising for Slack. Can you just explain why you decided to do offline marketing for sort of like a startup company?
Yeah, sure. So, it was a pretty, in-depth discussion around it. And really for Slack, there were a couple of factors that went into that decision. First off was I've been in the B2B space for about 10 years, and I'm always shocked with the level of outdated playbooks that a lot of companies use. I mean, I feel like there's this dusty old playbook, made from 40 years ago, which is like, send out a press release, hold an event, buy a steak dinner for the CIO and try to sell into it. And I just feel like a modern marketing organization needs to reinvent and innovate on what that go-to-market looks like. And so Slack had kind of a unique proposition where our product actually closely mimicked a B2C type product from the standpoint that it had a really large addressable audience. Essentially, anyone that uses email is a really good fit to switch over to Slack. And from that standpoint, we weren't really targeting a very narrow audience. We were targeting a pretty broad audience. And from that perspective, traditional B2C advertising was a really compelling value proposition for us. We chose the video format because it was something that really helped tell the story of Slack, and it could help bring to life the emotion and just improve our core brand metrics. But whether it was online or offline, we actually did both. We did a lot of YouTube advertising, a lot of the other video type network advertising. And then we did offline advertising from a TV standpoint. We also did out of home print. So we've really leveraged a lot of different formats out there.
Cool, really cool. Because I was just going to ask, don't you just reach out to the masses instead of like your target group? But then you just said you had quite a broad target group. So that totally makes sense. But I'm thinking, how can e-commerce companies get inspired by your sort of untraditional approach?
Yeah, I'd say, first off, I think sometimes when you're thinking about growing and how do you scale, like I've always been a big believer of growing and scaling efficiently. And I think with e-commerce companies, I think a lot of times the temptation is to move into purely like a transactional type of advertising. And if, for anyone on the audience, if you get a chance, like go to YouTube, you can search on like Slack Amazing Teams. And there's a couple different ads that we made for it, but you can say that they were very more brand centric. It was more about the emotion, the feel. There was a lot of, humor within the ads. And I see to this day, a lot of e-commerce companies are just so transactional. It is, they're targeting ad, buy this, follow you everywhere, buy right now. And I think in some ways, like that certainly has a purpose and it helps to achieve kind of the short-term sales. But I do think like sometimes when you think about building a longer term brand, you help to really build that affinity with a company. You help to build larger repeat customers and improve that average sales price. Customers tend to churn less. So I do think there's a great place, for advertising. And you think about brand campaigns, and it doesn't have to be massive national campaigns. I mean, when we first started out, we just did it in one city, and then we expanded to two cities, and we were very relentless about tracking, not just the increase in conversion and sales, and kind of the traditional funnel metrics, but we also looked at a lot of brand metrics like aided recall and unaided recall and sentiment and share of voice. And we basically got it down to understanding, for a point of awareness, how much would that cost us? And so I think it'd be really effective, whether in B2B, whether in e-commerce. It's just a lot of it's, devil's in the details and the creative itself and how you execute that campaign.
Oh, interesting. So really tapping into like the emotion part as well, getting emotionally attached to the brand.
Yeah. And, look, at the end of the day, it's funny. It's like, there's B2B buyers, there's e-commerce buyers, but at the end of the day, we're all people, right? And, I mean, think about brands that you love, and that you have an emotional connection to, and you're much more likely to stay with that brand. You're much more likely to recommend it. And the brand isn't just advertising. I've always been a believer the brand is the sum of every single touch point that a customer has with your company. And so that extends, beyond your advertising to your product, to your customer service, to your sales, to, the lighting in the store. I mean, there's everything, the experience when you surf an online e-commerce site. But I do think a lot of times advertising or marketing, it's really one of those first touch points that a customer will have with you. And if you can move beyond just a purely transactional type of ad, which, doesn't have much emotion to it, buy now, 20% off, free trial, whatever it is. I like having a touch point where people can engage with your brand, they understand who you are, and they walk away, with a smile on their face. That's definitely improving kind of the sentiment metric, if you will, of people's perceptions towards your company.
Great. So I want to talk more about doing something different marketing-wise. The startups you have entered have been fairly sort of large startups. But if you were to enter a mid-sized e-commerce startup or not just really grounded yet company, let's say an online store selling clothes, where would you begin marketing-wise?
Yeah. So, and maybe I'll clarify, like, hey, I've worked with startups. I've worked with tiny companies. Slack and Zendesk, when I joined, they were very small. They weren't like a big company. So I've been there, like I said, on the B2C side, I've founded some, startups that were small to begin and eventually grew to be big. But, I understand, like, look, when you are a smaller company or an e-commerce company, you don't have like a massive budget. And I think there's a lot of great marketing tactics out there that aren't very, capital intensive. I like investing in actually those long-term functions and plays that allow you to grow your company, but do it very efficiently. So I've always been a big believer in content marketing. I think that's an excellent way to engage with prospects, talking about their pain points, talking about topics that are top of mind. A lot of e-commerce, I mean, God, I buy like everything online. And, I usually go through this process where, I'm buying something new, some like Windows or a new TV, and I know absolutely nothing about it. So I have to spend a ton of time researching. And it's amazing. There's a lot of e-commerce companies out there that just basically have no content to help educate me on the market, on product, on what are good things to look for, what should I avoid. They end up just, I think, skipping a couple steps and just going straight to, all right, just buy this right now. And I find like there's a lot of great stats out there. People spend like 90% of their time researching before they go in and actually like will talk to someone or go to the site to actually purchase it. So I think content is a great play there. I think like leveraging evangelism is huge. So I like to have like a customer evangelism manager, and basically that role is really identifying who are the champions of your brand, whether you leverage like a net promoter score to understand that, or whether you can just use your own analytics and who buys from you the most, but, have a dialogue and engage with those top customers, those top champions, and help them out, maybe, take them out to a visit to your store or let them talk to the CEO, send them some swag, and really help amplify their platform so they become super evangelists for you, right? Get them on record. Maybe they're, film for a little commercial or something like that, or a testimonial. I think that whole evangelism is a great side. PR can be a great avenue as well. I think especially if you've got a charismatic CEO, or you've got a unique point of view on where your space is heading. I think those are always great ways. There's a high ROI impact on that. So, I mean, those are just a couple, but I think long term, just because you're investing in marketing and you want to grow the company doesn't mean it just has to be with a lot of dollars being spent.
Okay, let's get more specific. Hang in there, because Bill shares his favorite kind of content you can create to drive sales in the best way possible. Here's Bill again.
So I think a huge one is just if you are selling a set of products, I think a buyer guide is great. Whether you're selling closets, windows, TVs, a buyer's guide written from a neutral perspective. So again, you're not selling your store at this point. You're not pushing a specific product, but just, walk people through hey, when you're buying windows for the first time, here's some things to look at. Here's the difference between triple pane, double pane, and single pane. By the way, they sell tinting now, and that can help save on your energy bills. I just started looking at windows, so now I'm educated, but I went to a lot of sites to figure out what is this? And you can put security film on it, and there are the different locking devices and energy efficiency and all that stuff, right? I educated myself up. And I think, I went to a bunch of e-commerce vendors that sold windows, and a bunch of them had nothing, absolutely nothing on that, right? It's just, here's the actual windows itself. And some on the flip side just had a ton of articles just on all facets of buying windows, understanding them, what do they help gain. So I think that's a key part for me. It's just content that's not slimy, that's not selling, that's not pushing your own company too much, but is really educational and helpful. And eventually what happened is people then develop a trust with that brand or that e-commerce vendor. And then that helps them, they want to buy with them because they trust them.
Great, really good inputs. So I know a lot of online stores are battling with Amazon and other massive players at the moment. And I know it's probably on a lot of the listeners' minds. How would you go about competing with Amazon or similar large companies?
I think one of the reasons Amazon has gotten incredibly successful is they do focus on the customer experience. And I'm a huge proponent of a customer-centric philosophy, a customer-centric design, a customer-centric, every single touch point is a way to either delight or engage your customer. So, I think a lot of that comes back to maybe looking in the mirror and going hey, are we giving a great customer experience? When they find about us, what is that experience like? When they visit the site, what is that experience like? When something goes wrong and they need support, what is that experience like? What is the shipping like? There are so many just individual layers that I think sum up to what that overall experience is. And I think you can differentiate. So I'd say that's one area. I'd say another area, and I shop a lot. Like I said, I buy everything online. So I buy a lot of stuff on Amazon. I buy a lot of stuff for just individual unique e-commerce vendors. And I think, if you're on a specific vertical or a specific, products, I think you can go really deep where Amazon doesn't have that level of breadth and depth. Again, from a content standpoint, from the amount of products that you offer, additional value add. I remember I was, buying a bunch of, I'm a big gardener, and so I do drip irrigation. And, the stuff they had on Amazon, it just, I don't know, I didn't really learn anything, or there were only a couple products, and I went to a couple of just sites that just sell irrigation products, and they gave a bunch of commentary. They had a bunch of additional lenses for the products that helped me out buy it. I thought that was super helpful. And ultimately, you want to be able to just develop a great personality. And so the third thing I'd say is people love brands, and on the B2B side of my career, usually there's inclination of as you move up market, you have to be really, wear your suits and don't have any personality and be sterile. But I've always believed people love brands. And so a lot of the companies I worked for, whether it was a Slack or a Zendesk, they had a very unique point of view. They had an editorial tone and a voice. And so I'd say when you build out your sites and, have a tone, have a voice, have a personality, have a mascot, use colors, right? Write these product descriptions in a funny way, in an engaging way. That's something Amazon can never do. There's no way they could do that to 10 million products. But if you've got a smaller collection, maybe you can do that, right? Maybe you can do like video reviews and talk about it in a fun way. I think Shop at REI, they do that. I think that's fun. They have a unique point of view. But I think there's just a lot of opportunities there to help differentiate yourself.
Great. So let's go back to the idea of you entering a mid-sized e-commerce startup and you want to differentiate that startup from Amazon. Where would you start? Would you do content? Would you start doing video? What would you do?
I think the first one, and maybe I'll just tie into that last one I said there, was I would create a unique personality and brand. So I'd start off and I would just say, hey, what is our editorial tone and voice? Like, let's just describe it. Like, what are the values? So for instance, at Slack, we went through this exercise where we said, like, hey, our editorial tone and values are going to be, we want to talk in a human voice, a relatable voice, a funny voice. We aren't going to use acronyms anytime we talk with our customers and we put written words on our site and within the product. And then we also went through the same exercise, like in a visual identity standpoint, like what is the color scheme? What is the imagery we're going to use? And ultimately, again, it was like we kind of created a very unique brand that was very different from a lot of the traditional B2B collaboration type companies. So I think like that is a huge part of it, and I would start with that. I mean, there's so many, again, e-commerce vendors out there, and to differentiate, you can have this opportunity. And actually, if you're smaller, it's easier, right? Because it's a lot of times there's one person that's writing up all these descriptions or that can write the copy for the website. So I think that's a great area to start. And then from, like I said, a content standpoint, like, hey, just write up a great buyer's guide, not like one that's like one page, but, it's like 10 pages long and it's got great visuals. Maybe it's got a video in it, and help the people. I mean, if you're in the e-commerce space and you're selling a specific set of products, sometimes you know it really well, right? Well, pass that knowledge on. Like, that's awesome knowledge that you can use to develop a relationship. And then, of course, the great thing with content, it's not just good for customers. Of course, it's going to start ranking over time, because if it's good content, people will link to it, people will share it, people will like it, and then you'll get a nice steady stream of organic search traffic coming to your site.
Bill has incredible experience in establishing marketing teams that really create unbelievable results. Here's his best advice to hiring the right employees, what you should look out for, and how to build a successful team. So
I think, look, when you start off and you're smaller, you're going to be hiring generalists. You're going to be hiring a marketer that's doing everything. They're doing the marketing operations and the multi-channel attribution. They're doing the positioning, the messaging. They're doing the brand. They're doing the ads. They're doing the evangelism. And you want to find someone that likes that likes to be a jack of all trades and does different things. As you grow and scale the company, like, I think there's a lot of different disciplines you can start to bring in. So I like marketing ops, marketing operations. You're going to start needing to build out a marketing tech stack that has best of breed around content management, around multi-channel attribution, around just all the different elements of those marketing communications that you send out, your email marketing, your lead nurturing, your advertising. I think marketing ops is really key. I like product marketing. I think product marketing is all about that higher level narrative of who the company is. They're going to help out with your editorial tone and voice. They're going to help you out with like pricing and packaging. I like bringing in campaigns teams. So they're the ones who are going to run like the outbound advertising campaigns. I think those are really helpful. And then, of course, depending on your state of company, you're going to build additional lenses on that. You're going to add in PR. You're going to add in lifecycle nurturing. And, there's a bunch of additional teams that you'll start to build out over time. But those are a couple of the key ones that I would start out with. Cool.
Is there any specific skill sets you would look for in the person you're looking to hire?
Hungry learner. Marketing and online marketing. I mean, it's constantly changing. It's evolving. I like to ask when I'm on interviews with people, hey, how do you learn? Like, what sites do you go to? What conferences do you go to? What books have you read? What, podcasts are you listening to? And, if there's someone that's constantly learning and has that thirst for knowledge, I find that usually works really well, especially for online marketing roles, because again, like, the technology is always changing, whether using, account-based marketing or multi-touch attribution or retargeting, or just, there's so many new techniques that are going out there. And if you can find someone that's really a hungry learner, they can become great at one thing. A lot of times that can be a key differentiator. That can be a massive growth driver for you.
Amazing. And are there any warning signs you need to be aware of when you're hiring for your marketing department?
You know, I think over time, as I've gotten older, the worst hires I've made have been those that where the person may have been a great domain expert at what they do, but they were just a bad culture fit. And I think like spend the time just to understand like what is your culture. Have you codified that? Do you know like here are the core values of our company, and then make sure you've taught the people that are hiring how to tease those out. So one of the things, for instance, at Slack, like I was a huge customer centric believer. And during the interview, I would look for, in all my questions, I would just go, hey, when they answered all these questions, did they even mention the customer once? If they never mentioned the customer once, they're just not a good fit, right? Because we were such a religiously customer centric company, right? Like every decision was about, well, how's this going to impact the customer and what's their experience? And we had like crazy huge support teams, and we get back to people in like 5 minutes, and it was just all about the customer. So I think like eventually, like you just have to make sure it's a really good fit from a value perspective.
Cool. All right. Just to sum up all of these amazing insights, what would your advice be to e-commerce companies struggling with really standing out from the crowd?
I think like I'm rooting for you. I don't think there's been a better time to launch a business. We're in a golden age of innovation. There's so many great tools. The barriers to entry are lower. Small business e-commerce sites have access to world-class software that the biggest enterprises have now. And I think in a lot of ways, like you can get such a better experience from a smaller or a medium-sized e-commerce vendor than you can just by going to the biggest vendors of the world. It's almost a similar parallel. If you have an offline store, and you're a small business, like, of course, it's all about that experience when someone comes in, the additional knowledge they can get, the additional support, the additional care. And I think like translating that to online and differentiating from a knowledge standpoint, from an experience standpoint, and from a brand standpoint, speak in a unique voice, whatever your voice is, speak in it. Don't try to dumb it down. Don't try to be sterile. Be quirky, be fun, from a visual standpoint, from a written standpoint. Like people love that. It's what's going to get them coming back. It's what's going to get them spending more from you. And more importantly, it's what's going to get them to recommend you. And ultimately, no matter what type of company you are, if you have a ton of people out there recommending you, you're going to have a strong, healthy, organic growth, and your company's going to be in great shape.
That was fantastic. Bill, thank you so much for your time. That was wonderful.
It was my pleasure. Thank you again for having me.
That's it, podcast people. I hope you found this episode inspiring. And if that's the case, I would be super happy if you could rate it in whatever app you get your podcast from. And also, sharing is caring. So if you have any inputs or ideas for me, please do leave a comment. Cheers!
This session of E-Commerce Boost was produced by Sleeknote. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on tactics and strategies that'll help boost your e-commerce.